And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome to Open Connection. I'm your host, Robert Pictou. Our show today comes to you from the traditional and unceded territory of the Tsimshian people. Expo 86 had a troubled legacy. When the fair site for Expo 86 was created, most of the industrial structures were swept away without regard to their heritage value. However, the World's Fair drastically altered Vancouver's international status. Expo 86 put Vancouver on the map as a global destination. Over 22 million people attended the event, and a boom in tourism and trade followed. On today's Open Connection, Barry Penner of the Vancouver International Arbitration Center.
Don't know how many of you remember Expo 86, but the governments of the day were really trying to make a splash on the world stage. One of the goals of the provincial government at the time was to use the international attention on Vancouver for Expo to also make it more of a financial and business center internationally. One of the things they thought would help was to establish Vancouver as a center for commercial arbitration, because at that time most arbitration in the world was happening in places like London, Paris, and Singapore in Asia. And they thought maybe Vancouver could get into that ball game and help it make it more of a financial center as well. There were other initiatives, but one of them was the establishment of this organization, which is, however, completely independent of government. So they set us up, got us started, gave us some money for a few years to get going, and then cut the funding and said good luck. And there's nobody telling us exactly what to do with the provincial government. I came along in 2017. I got recruited to come and take on the role as managing director, and my first priority was to change the name, because I had a heck of a time getting BCICAC out, much less the full name, British Columbia International Commercial Arbitration Center. It was just too long. And I remember that from my time in government preparing for the Winter Olympics in 2010, going around outside the country, very few people in Asia or Europe knew what British Columbia was. Most knew Vancouver and they knew Canada, but British Columbia, for many people I'd met, they thought that was maybe a territory somewhere in the Caribbean or in north part of South America. So I was able to get the board convinced we should rebrand, and we've done that. So we're now the Vancouver International Arbitration Center for the past 2 years. It's easier to roll off the tongue, and I think it has more international recognition. So, but what exactly are we about? In short, we're supposed to be providing an alternative to the court system. And I think most people have an understanding that one of the downsides to our court system is time delay. And everyone knows that time is money. And there's the cost of your time being distracted and stressed out waiting for a decision or waiting to get your matter heard, that in British Columbia can take several years to get to a full civil trial in BC Supreme Court. And then there's, of course, the direct financial cost of your legal fees. I'm a lawyer, but I recognize that fees are exorbitant, and it's just absolutely severe. The combination of the actual outlay of legal fees, that as cases drag on for years, plus the distraction and the stress and the uncertainty, and ultimately the damage that these kinds of issues can have if they're left to fester. So many of the cases that we deal with are businesses that are well established. They've been working with a partner, another business for years, selling telephones or tires or components for various things, lumber, and they want to continue having that business relationship, but there's something that's happened that they disagree about. They still want to do business together, but there's a particular issue that's very significant, and they can't seem to get an agreement. And so rather than going off to court and waiting for years to resolve it, there is an alternative, and it's commercial arbitration. And that's essentially like a private judge or private court, where the parties pay for some independent person who's an expert in the area to look at the two sides, the two cases, the two sets of arguments and the materials that are provided, and make a decision quickly, and hopefully do so in a way that the two parties can continue to do business with each other, get back to business, and have the rest of the relationship survive intact. The danger if you let things fester for too long in any relationship is it can undermine the entire relationship.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Thank you for staying with us. During his nearly 16 years in elected office as a member of the BC legislature, Barry was intimately involved in helping shape environmental energy and other public policy development in Canada's third largest province. Let us return the conversation with Barry Penner.
The types of matters that we typically deal with, domestic commercial arbitration, that's really our bread and butter. It's the types of things I just mentioned. I'll go into more detail later. As our name suggests, we aspire to do international cases. So where a business in Canada is contracting to sell something to Japan, coal or lumber, and there's a dispute, those cases can be brought to us, and we in turn will appoint an arbitrator. If the parties can't agree amongst themselves who should decide the case, then that's what we do. We'll appoint someone from our roster of about 130 experts in various fields. And I'll just pause there to note that that's a major difference between arbitration and the court system. There's a lot of value in our court system, but one of the flaws, if you're a participant in a specialized area, let's say electronics or lumber or coal or construction dispute, is the judge that gets appointed to hear a case may have never thought about construction for a day in their life, or been exposed at all to anything to do with mining or forestry. They might have been a lawyer practicing family law, and now they're being asked to decide on a complicated financial case or a partnership dispute between accountants. Those are the types of cases we get. So with arbitration, typically your arbitrator is someone who's actually got experience in that subject area. You choose. The parties usually can come to some kind of an agreement between themselves about who will hear their case. And of course, in the court system, that's not how it works. Justice is blind. The parties don't have any input into selecting who the judge will be that hears their matter. And the chief judge will try, when they're able, to match up a judge that's available to the type of subject matter that's before the court. But very often it's just not possible to actually match somebody up who's got deep experience, let's say in criminal law, to hear a family law case. That happens all too often. And so anyway, arbitration's advantage is you get somebody who knows the subject area. Other matters that we've been dealing with since 2004, I think this is a testament to the government recognizes our neutrality, and they have confidence in us. We do underinsured motorist protection cases for ICBC, so instead of going to court when there's a disagreement about how much you should get paid if one of the people that hit you was not properly insured, it goes to arbitration, and we administer that. It's a good question. Why did the government only have those limited subset of cases available for arbitration and let the other majority of personal injury cases languish in the court system for years and years? I don't know, but it's just a quirk of history. And then more recently, we've been doing the Canadian International Internet Registration, well, actually since 2002, but we've grown that business since I've become managing director. So having looked at that, we're doing domain name disputes. You've heard of cyber squatting? That's where somebody might think, got a way to make money. I'll register a website name, stuartmuir.com, but I'm not Stuart Muir. But I'm going to register the rights to that website name. And then if Stuart Muir comes along someday and says, hey, I want that name, then I'll say, great, but you'll have to pay me $25,000 or something similar. And he thinks it's worth a lot more. Well, let's talk. And so there is actually a lot of money at stake for these internet domain names. LasVegas.com got sold for $100 million US. So people really do fight hard over these internet domain names. So we've been doing the work for the .ca domain names, ones that end in .ca, for many years. I thought, why don't we branch out and try to do the rest of them, .com, .net, .org, etc. And so we approached the International Corporation for the Assignment of Numbers and Names, ICANN, which is a not-for-profit neutral body that governs the internet, essentially, and domain names. If you go to GoDaddy and they sell you a domain name, they're actually having to register it with ICANN. What underpins everything is ICANN, International Corporation for Assignment of Names and Numbers. I only happened to know about it by a quirk that a friend of mine was working there as their vice president of communications. So I'd had a chance to visit their offices in Los Angeles and knew about this entity and thought, let's approach them. So long story short, took some doing, but we've been approved now to handle disputes for people fighting over domain names. So Stuart Muir could go to court in BC Supreme Court and claim this is an intellectual property infringement and spend 3 to 5 years fighting someone like me that's registered his name. Or he could pay me the $25,000, or now he could register a dispute with us through our subsidiary, the Canadian International Internet Dispute Resolution Center, and we will adjudicate that case and find out if Barry Penner should have stuartmuir.com or if Stuart Muir has a stronger claim to stuartmuir.com. And these kinds of cases are happening with amazing frequency, and it's on a huge uptrend around the world.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome back to Open Connection. Whenever a business or a brand wants to claim a memorable piece of real estate on the web, they often purchase a short, memorable domain that visitors can quickly type into their web browser. Let us return to the conversation as Barry shares how fraudsters try to trick you online.
I don't have the stats immediately on the top of my head, but the growth in disputes over domain names is somewhere around 10 to 15% per year, year over year. They're in the tens of thousands. And everyone from TD Bank, Bank of Montreal, CN, for example, they jealously guard people that are trying to appropriate their website domain names and fool people into thinking, because it's so similar, it might be TD Banker, tdbanker.com gets registered. And then they go in a phishing enterprise and try to get your credit card number or somehow get into your pocket. So TD Bank has a whole army of people that are constantly monitoring the internet and going after people that are grabbing these names, registering them, and then pretending to be the bank and defrauding people. So rather than going to the court system, which will take years, they're doing it through the Internet Dispute Resolution policy and procedures. Anytime somebody registers a domain name like GoDaddy, they have to agree to comply with ICANN's policies for dispute resolution. So as soon as you then buy that name through GoDaddy, you are also agreeing to be bound by the outcome of our process, because we follow the policies of ICANN. And the minute a decision's made, and it happens quickly, the domain name rights get transferred. We give the word to ICANN, they transfer the domain name to Stuart Muir, and he's in business. So just remember that. There is an alternative to paying the exorbitant shakedown fee that some of these entrepreneurs who sit in their home all day thinking of different domain names to register. There's an alternative to just paying whatever they're demanding. You can challenge it if you think you have a stronger right or claim to that name. It's really a trademark. It's an intellectual property, a form of intellectual property, and it's a real emerging and growing area. I mentioned that LasVegas.com sold for $100 million. Buy Car USA or something recently sold for $20 million, and people were fighting over that name. And these things are happening with frequency. I was the chair of ICBC. We looked at selling the domain name rights to ICBC.com because the largest bank in the world is the, International Commercial Bank of China, I think, ICBC. And they desperately wanted to get our domain name because they couldn't use it. We'd registered it first. ICBC in British Columbia, the insurance corporation, had registered it ahead of the International Commercial Bank of China. And they desperately wanted our name, but for political reasons, we were guided we should probably not be doing business with them and selling the domain name rights. But that's an indication of how valuable website domain names are to business. It's an important part of marketing these days, and actual sales. And what else? Oh, the newest thing we've got going is wondering why we're only doing a subset of ICBC work. When the courts were closed due to COVID, and I mean they were closed, you couldn't file a piece of paper. I tried, and it just said, go away. You can't even drop paper off at the registry at the BC Supreme Court. And it was like that for months. So knowing that there are all kinds of cases getting bumped that had already been waiting for years, we approached the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court and then David Eby, the then Attorney General, and his deputy, Richard Fife, said, we have a proposal. Give people the alternative. If they're really anxious to get their case heard, we'll handle it. And the Chief Justice said, no thanks. We've got it under control, and people can wait. Whereas the Deputy of Attorney General, Richard Fife, was very keen to see what we could do on ICBC cases to expand it. So that's how we're now running an ICBC pilot project for an expanded number of cases to provide an alternative. And just to tell you how severe this is, so imagine you've been severely injured in a car crash. It's taken years to collect all the evidence, get the medical reports. The doctors and the lawyers always want until your condition stabilizes, till it plateaus, so they know how long you're going to be sick, or if you've recovered, if you're not going to recover, what your final outcome is going to be from that accident, so they can assess the damages. Like, oh, what's this worth, the quantum? That takes years. Then you go through discovery. You get all the expert reports lined up, and you set a trial date for a year and a half or 2 years down the road. So you can be 3 to 5 years in after your car accident to get your trial date. And then you show up for trial, and the registry says, sorry, we're triple booked. We triple booked thinking that the cases would settle, but these cases didn't settle. So 2 out of 3 of you have to go away and come back another day to rebook your trial, which will be another 2 to 3 years from now. So now you're looking at a 5 to 7 year delay to get dealt with. And so the way it works with our pilot project is if you show up at the courthouse and you're ready for trial, you've done all your examinations for discovery, all your expert reports are completed, and the court says we don't have time, well then you can phone us and we'll have an arbitrator appointed within a day or 2, and you can then have your case heard immediately in front of an arbitrator and get your decision, and not wait another 2 to 3 years to rebook your trial. That's the idea.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
The Vancouver International Arbitration Center was established in 1986 and acts as a facilitator for domestic, national, and international arbitrations. In this final segment of Open Connection, Barry shares how adding a simple clause in your contract can save a business time and money.
But I think more relevant probably for people here and Indigenous businesses in this area are commercial disputes. And these are the typical kinds of cases we see. And again, it is still our bread and butter. This is the majority of the work we do, from construction and employment disputes, technology, purchase and sale, shareholder disputes, mining, franchise, forestry, and just general services. So in order to get yourself, this is an open letter written by Stephen Point, British Columbia's former Lieutenant Governor and former, still the Grand Chief of the Stolo, but former Chief of the Schuylkill, and a friend of mine from Chilliwack. He wrote an open letter for us that appeared in a legal publication known as The Advocate this year, just an open letter to all First Nations, recommending that in their business agreements, try to stay out of court. Which is quite something because, of course, he's a former judge. But he's recommending put in a clause in your commercial agreements that you will not go to court. You will try to mediate, and if you can't, then you will arbitrate, which means a final decision from an individual you have some input into selecting. So you just see the top paragraph there. To make this happen, it's advisable that while writing the contract or business agreement, the parties dedicate some time and planning to the important dispute resolution clauses, so the path for solving these problems is clear. We can provide suggested wording to use in your contracts, tailored for your situation, as we've done for the private sector. I can't see the rest of it. Anyway, Stephen was a director of ours at the Arbitration Center, and just wanted to bring that to your attention. Again, you need to put it into your agreement while you're still getting along with each other, to think forward. If we do have a dispute, how do we isolate that conflict, resolve it quickly so we can move on and carry on, hopefully together. And if not, at least you don't spend too much time and money fighting over whatever it is you're disagreeing about. Just shows the uptick on our caseload in the last few years. We really did get busier with COVID and so on. And we've handled a couple $2 billion worth of disputes in the last couple of years. And again, the summary is that it's quicker, it's effective, that means it's more economical, and it's also confidential. Unlike in the court system, most judgments get published. Your competitors can see what you're up to. They can see maybe what you're paying your staff, or how much you were paying for your products, or what your profit and loss is. Many companies are very sensitive about that being public. If you go to arbitration, typically it's kept confidential.
Called the Kitimat ammonia upgrade, the project involved moving a mothballed plant from Indiana and refurbishing it to BC standards.
It will be cost effective in as much as energy numbers will be reduced, and there will be more tonnage per day, something to the tune of 250 to 300 tons a day of extra production out of it.
The timing is right. Prices have risen substantially in the last year. All the tie-ins to the existing plant have been done, and startup is set for mid-September. Soaring 150 feet in the air is a new heating tower.
We heat the gas temperature in this tower to, depending on which stream it is, between 360 degrees C and 650 degrees C. It's extremely hot.
So there has to be a lot of testing and so on go into all the components that goes into a process like this.
Oh yeah, that's correct. All of the systems that run into and out of that particular heater have been X-rayed 100%. They've had a lot of non-destructive testing done on them, and they have all been subjected to hydro testing.
Earlier this week, a key part of the process was underway.
We're loading catalyst with the cranes right now. The big yellow crane is being used for loading catalyst, and the mobile crane with the boom standing there is being used for dressing that vessel. There's still a little bit of work left to do on the heater, and we use that man basket to get up there.
The new process was developed by the Kellogg Company, which is on the leading edge of this type of technology. It's the second time new methods developed by Kellogg have been put into operation in Kitimat.
We're expecting that this unit will provide as per the pilot project, and that it'll be as successful as the CAP unit was.
Because it's a big capital expense.
There's a substantial capital expense over a lab-type pilot. Replacement of this unit with conventional reforming would cost several millions over and above this expense.
Methanex ran into opposition at the start of the new year because of conflicts with building trades over the issue of local hiring.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Open Connection. The greatest distance in the existence of man is not from here to there, but the connection from his mind and heart. If we can conquer that distance, we can soar like an eagle and realize our immensity within. I'm Robert Pictou.